welcome to the Rank and Report football show this week from Washington, D.C. to London, England. Yeah, switch up in locations on you. I am your host, Adam Booker, and I'm joined, as I always am, by Mr. Charlie Gordon. How you doing, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm all right. I didn't realize you were in Washington DC. I didn't realize you'd flown like a massive distance there. You're right where it's all kicking off. You're right in
Yeah,
the
I
action
figured it
zone.
was. I figured it was on theme for election week.
Yeah,
Although this election seems to not have an ending anywhere in sight, but I figured it was on theme to end up in DC.
yeah.
But we got a little Real Sociedad talk today. Who's sitting top of La Liga. Should be pretty interesting. But before we jump into that, I do want to mention, as I always do, to encourage everybody to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the notification bell to the right of it to get notified when we release another video. And if you are somebody that prefers the audio versions of these episodes, you can find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast. Just search the Rank and Report football show, and we will be the first thing that pops up. I think we're on about 91 subscribers now, so I think I can speak for both Charlie and I when I say thank you to everyone that subscribed so far.
Definitely.
But since we are nearing that 100 subscriber milestone, when we hit 100, we've got a pretty awesome kit giveaway that we're going to run. So encourage your friends to hop into the channel and hit that subscribe button and start following all of these videos.
Yeah, especially sorry, Adam. Especially while the crowd is still small, which obviously won't be for long because we're going to boom in popularity anytime now. But while the crowd is still small, your chances are good to win that kit. So I think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, and it'll be an easy. You only have minor hoops to jump through to win the kit, so it'll be pretty easy. All right, why don't we hop into some Real Sociedad talk? Pretty immaculate story so far this season. I mean, obviously it's a bit of a fluky season all around Europe. We're seeing a lot of teams we don't normally see at the top of their leagues, and Sociedad is one of those teams. They've played 8 games so far in La Liga, won 5, drawn 2, and lost 1. That one loss was to Villarreal, who's, another top 4 candidate, so it's not an easy nut to crack there. But Charlie, where do we start with this team? What is it about this team that has them on such a roll right now in Spain?
I think they've been on a steady improvement. It seems like it's not as if they've come from completely nowhere. They came in 6th place last season, so they're playing Europa League football this season. But yeah, it just seems like it's kind of a young team that's continued their upward trajectory. If I can pronounce that word. So yeah, I think everything's kind of starting to click from this season, especially in attack. You got their wingers Oyarzabal and Porto. Oyarzabal in particular is an interesting one because he's only 23 years of age, but he's basically a veteran at Sociedad already. He's captain,
isn't he? When
captain,
David Silva isn't captain,
yeah. I think he's captain. He's made over 200 or 250 appearances or something as a 23-year-old, and he's already their top scorer this season. And I guess we'll get into all the tactical stuff, the intricacies of how that's working later on. But yeah, just to sum it up, I think they're just on an upward trajectory. They had a solid season last season, and they've brought it into this season where other La Liga teams are faltering, it seems like.
Yeah, well, you talk about that upward trajectory, and since the manager, Alguacil, I believe is how you pronounce it, he took over in December of 2018. They finished in 9th that season, and then, like you said, 6th last season, and now obviously sitting in 1st. So it's just going up and up and up. And yeah, I mean, when you talk about this attack, I think one place you have to start is obviously 34-year-old David Silva, who doesn't seem to have slowed down since leaving Manchester City. And obviously this is a player who you and I watched probably all, if not most, if not all of his games when he was at City. And, we've seen what he can bring to the table. But I think the biggest thing that he provides for this team, like you said, it's a very young team, is some title credentials and a guy that knows how to win it and knows how to handle yourselves when you are sitting at 1st, 2nd, whatever it may be. But, when we speak tactically about what he brings, typically they play with 4 in midfield, and the last two games against Celta Vigo and the week before that, I believe it was Huesca, he played just right behind the striker, and he has that ability to just pick a pass, and he always plays with his back to goal in a way, and he can just turn and make these little tricky passes to play people like Oyarzabal in, or Christian Porto has been um, another real positive light for this team. So what do you have to say on David Silva? Because obviously, we've seen a ton of him, but he's not slowing down.
Yeah, no, we've got plenty to say on David Silva because he's 34, but he's got the kind of skill set which means when he gets older, he's not going to slow down because his game's never ever been built on pace. And in some ways, you might think the older he gets, the more experience he gets, kind of the better he's going to be because it's all about reading the game, knowing when to play the pass, and things like that. But in terms of where he fits in at Sociedad, I kind of see him as a deep facilitator, more like a quarterback type thing, to use that cliche, which always gets used. But I feel like Sociedad is set up to facilitate their wingers scoring goals. You can see it already this season. You've got Porto, who's got 4 goals. Oyarzabal's got 5 goals. They're their 2 top scorers by quite a distance already. So Sociedad's team is pretty much set up to facilitate these wingers, to get these wingers in. They move from outside, out wide to in, like inside forwards, like Salah and Mane is the most obvious example. And to kind of allow them to do this, they've got a facilitator up top, which is the big man. So I'm sure we'll get onto that further on as well. But, just to gloss over it, you got Willian Jose or Alexander Isaac who plays the big man to hold up play at top. But deeper, you've got David Silva. And to be honest, there's almost no one better in the world. Well, I'm sure there is, but because he's 34. But, in terms of the last 10 years, there's almost no one better to be linking up play, finding the right pass, playing players in from deep than David Silva. I'm a huge admirer of him, and I'm not surprised one bit that he's started off his Sociedad career really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I urge anybody that hasn't watched this team play yet to watch them this weekend because they're very fun to watch. And like Charlie was explaining, the way that those wingers can cut inside and provide goals, assists, and anything you need from them, they're always there. So moving back a little bit from the attack, however, I think a big part of what makes this team tick is Mikel Moreno in midfield. Like you said, David Silva can be that kind of deep lying facilitator, but with all of these attacking options that they have, and they play with a lot of pace, that means that you can get countered. And Mikel Moreno is somebody that I really admire in that midfield, that has the ability to, yes, play a pass and be a facilitator as well, but he also has the ability to break up play, set the tempo. And, like, I believe Mikel Moreno's under the age of 25.
Yeah, he's young. He's not that old.
So, this team is very young, and by the looks of it, the trajectory of the whole club is going upwards. I took down this excerpt from The Athletic about how right now the hierarchy of the club is under no pressure to sell any of their assets because they've just revamped the stadium for when fans get back in. And not only that, but they actually have a Copa del Rey final still to play from last season against Athletic Bilbao. And they've postponed that until fans can attend. And if fans can't attend by next April, then they're going to just play it behind closed doors. But, the upward trajectory is something to admire of this team because this tactical setup that we're looking at is so young and doesn't seem like it's going to be broken up anytime soon.
Yeah, no, they've, like you said, they've not been splashing the cash at all. They're like you said, they're not in a position where they have to sell any of their key players. They had Martin Odegaard was their star player last year, and he's gone back to Madrid, and pretty much his career is ready to take off now because he'd proven his point at Sociedad, and they kind of filled his hole by not going and spending 50 million or 60 million on someone who is as good as Odegaard, but instead they brought in David Silva for free, who kind of, even though he's towards the back end of his career, I wouldn't say he's a massive downgrade from Odegaard. They offer slightly different things, but I'd say they filled that hole fairly well without spending a penny. So So that's obviously shows that they're run pretty well, even though David Silva won't be filling that hole for years and years. But just to backtrack to Moreno, I agree with you. He's a very tidy player, and he's a full Spain international now. I've seen him. Spain are giving a few chances to some lesser known players, and I can't remember who I watched him against. It was probably 3-4 weeks ago. I watched a Spain match. It might have been Spain Portugal, or I might just be completely making that up. But he's a really tidy player. He's the one that stood out to me from the whole Spain team, and it's weird because he actually played for Newcastle a few years ago. I don't know if you remember that. And
Yeah.
he was at Newcastle and he didn't do a single thing. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if people who watch the Premier League don't even remember who Moreno is, because he didn't do a whole lot for Newcastle. But now he's at Sociedad. He's showing really good technical ability, and for a team who want to play football from back to front, he's an essential part of that team because he's so good at taking it, seeing the pass, beating a man if he needs to, and playing the ball on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about him being in the Premier League and kind of being irrelevant to English football fans. Athletic Bilbao, who, as we know, they only employ Basque players. Mikel Merino is a Basque player, and they passed up the chance to take him basically because he was irrelevant at Newcastle. Ends up at Sociedad, another Basque club, I believe. And, he's now running things in that midfield. So before we get on to talk about how sustainable the start of the season is and talk about the title push that they maybe can make, I want to just point out one thing which I found very impressive. So of the 16 players that featured against Celta last weekend, 12 of them were graduates of Real Sociedad's B team, which is actually coached by Xabi Alonso these days. But I thought that was very impressive and kind of goes back to the point of where you're saying they haven't spent big money to get to where they are, but only 4 players of the 16 that featured didn't come from their homegrown system. So obviously there's something in the water in Sociedad.
Yeah, no, that is really impressive, and I think it probably comes down to the fact that, say, like the Basque clubs, I know that Bilbao's policy is strictly they will only play players that come from the Basque country, which for people who don't know is a very small region in Spain that's kind of got their own kind of sub-nationality, and they'll only play players from that region. So if you're forced into that kind of situation, that club needs to be well run. Otherwise, it's not going to succeed. If you've got £1 billion to spend, then you can kind of forget about it being well run because the incentive isn't there. You just go and spend £100 million on a player and then deal with the consequences later. So yeah, with these Spanish clubs, the Basque clubs in particular, like Sociedad, they're forced into a position where they have to be well run. But like you say, it's really good to see. It's always very admirable when a club is playing a load of homegrown players.
Yeah, especially when in an era and when these bigger clubs in the bigger leagues are kind of forced into not giving their youngsters a chance. So yeah, like you said, it's very admirable. All right, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about their title credentials. Obviously, they're sitting in first right now with a 1-point lead over Real Madrid, who, it's worth mentioning, do have a game in hand over Sociedad. But what do you see with Sociedad as what is success for this season after this kind of start? Is it a sustained title push? Is it top 4?
Yeah, so I think probably top 4 for Sociedad would be a really successful season for them. They finished 6th last season and got Europa League football. I think the step up to the Champions League would be absolutely huge for them. I don't think they've got the resources to mount a proper title challenge this year, but I do think if you're going to have a crack at the top 4 or even the top, the real big boys in Spanish football, this is definitely the season to do it. Because Barcelona are going through a huge transition period and it's kind of up in the air how well they're going to do come the end of the season. Madrid are still probably favourites to win the league, but they're nowhere near as formidable as they used to be. So if there was a season to mount this kind of challenge, it would be this one. But do I think that they can, in all likelihood, challenge for the title? Probably not. But like I said, top four would be huge for them to see them in the Champions League next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think success would definitely be to continue that upward trajectory and just keep moving up in in quality, as well as if you can keep this team together in the next couple seasons, then perhaps 2, 3 years down the road you can mount a title push. But like you said, it is one of those seasons where La Liga is pretty weak, and the normal big boys that are finishing on 90 plus points aren't going to be doing that this year. So if any year is the year for a not so recognized team to snatch that title, we talked a bit about this in Italy with AC Milan last week. But if any year is the year for a not so recognized team to snatch the title, it could be this year. I think perhaps that another important thing they should focus on is the Europa League. I think there could potentially be a shot at them to snatch some big European silverware there. I think their biggest competitors would be Milan and Napoli, who they're actually in the group with Napoli and played a pretty tough 1-0 loss at home. But
Yeah.
I think if those two played 10 times, it could finish 5-5. So
Yeah, and that's very, very respectable as well. To give Napoli a good game is really respectable because in terms of the players they've got, Napoli are a far superior squad. And they're also flying themselves. It's not just like Napoli have got good players, but they're not quite putting it together. Like they're flying in Serie A. So, I didn't watch the game, but I watched the highlights, and to see Sociedad given as good as they got against the likes of Napoli, that's a really good sign. I think, despite the 1-0 loss, I think the fans will be pretty chuffed with what they achieved there.
yeah, it's also worth mentioning at time of recording they're nearly halfway through their group stage game against AZ Alkmaar. So they could lose 6-0 today, and we look like chumps by the time this video comes out
in,
today. But
in all likelihood, that's how it's going to go, isn't it? With how our predictions have been going so far, like our first ever video was about Atalanta, and all of a sudden, we've just put a curse on them. But we're hoping for them.
All right, Charlie. Any last words on Real Sociedad?
I would also just say a bit of admiration for their manager. Like you say, I think he's worth a mention. Imanol Alguacil, very difficult name to pronounce.
Yeah.
But, like you said, he joined in 2018, but he's actually been at the club in some capacity since 2011. So I think he was managing the B team, the youth teams and stuff like that. And he had an 8-year playing career at Sociedad. So like you say, it kind of fits in with the whole homegrown narrative of the club. And the fact that he's
family atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's quite a distinct set of tactics that he uses as well. He's quite a complex tactical team. And the fact that he's been there for so long, and a lot of the players like Ayarthabal, even though he's young, William Jose, these guys have been there for 4 or 5 years, and the fact that they've been under Alguacil that whole time means that he's been able to properly put his philosophy in their heads. And just aside from that, it's just good to see a homegrown manager who spent a lot of time playing and working behind the scenes at the club get a good run there and start having some success as well.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's going to wrap up our Real Sociedad talk. Before we sign off, just want to mention one more time, if you're watching this, please hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell to be notified when we release a new video. And if you've got any thoughts on Real Sociedad or any thoughts on what we had to say about them, then drop us a comment below and we can get to responding to you as well. So, all right, I believe that is it for today, and we will see you later.
Yeah, see ya.